Glad to know you're still with us. In a landmark event that officially changes the oil firm from a wholly state-run entity to a commercial oil company limited by shares, President Muhammadu Buhari says the new status of Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited will enable the commercial entity to deliver value to 200 million shareholders. Buhari, who was accompanied by the Senate President Ahmad Lawan, Speaker of the House of Representatives Femi Gbajabiamila, and other dignitaries at the State House Conference Center in Abuja, assured the new company will guarantee energy security in the country. According to the President, Nnpc Limited will sustainably deliver value to its over 200 million shareholders and the global energy community, operate without relying on government funding, and be free from institutional regulations such as the Treasury Single Account, TSA. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited on Tuesday made it clear that it would no longer remit any money to the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee, FAC, for sharing to the 3 tiers of government monthly. It said this was based on its latest transition from a public corporation to a limited liability company, and that it currently owed no money to FAC, as all monetary arrests to the committee were owed by the old corporation and not the new oil company. Before its official unveiling as a limited company, the Nnpc had failed to make any remittance to FAC since this year. It had consistently deducted the amount it spent on fuel subsidy monthly, a development that had eroded the funds which it would have remitted to the committee. Findings showed that between January and May this year, the oil company had spent 1.274 trillion naira on petrol subsidy, being the sole importer of the commodity into Nigeria. It, however, described its subsidy spending as under recovery of a premium motor spirit or value shortfall. And for further analysis, I'm joined by Dr. Leke Ebenezer. Thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, now we're looking at this particular matter now. Let's have your reaction to that. The fact that it has changed from a corporation, state-owned company to a limited liability company. Talk to us about this. What's your reaction to this?
Okay. Of course, my quick reaction to this is the fact that at every given point, it has always been believed that government do not have any business in doing business. And of course, the meaning of that is that, anything handled by the government, because they are not wired to run, a company to make profit, is for welfareism. So on that note, they may not really, the level of performance may not be as expected as when you have a company that is regulated outside the government, that is company regulated by CAMA. But the fear of the conversion from public to private corporation does not only lie in the fact that it is good to change ownership, but when you look at the records, it has not been the record has not been so good. For example, there were arguments as to the fact that as at the time, some other oil company outside Nigeria that are regulated by the government are making as much as $300 billion. Nigeria was making well over 6 trillion loss, due to subsidy, instead of locally refining the product. And of course, that has been the fear of the people, that even when the company was run by the government, we were making loss. So what gives you the impression that now that it's now a private, a privately run company owned by shareholders, regulated by CAMA, you are going to get the expected result? Because there are religious tendencies that have been in the company, the issue of nepotism, a lot of unethical issues that have been happening in Nnpc long before now. So how will the change of name cope with all of those various factors that have been affecting that sector long before now, because you cannot be bigger than your environment as a company. So the question is, even if you change the name and you are expecting that that company should now perform now that it is owned by shareholders, in which type of environment are you making that to happen? Of course, the Nnpc boss has claimed that this change of ownership will end energy poverty and losses. But then the question remains that despite the transition, looking at the harsh environment and a lot of political factors that have been happening in that space before now, how do you want to handle staff redundancy? How do you want to handle stakeholders' expectation? And especially, how do you want to manage the company making profits in an environment that is not too friendly for private businesses? Those are my thoughts.
All right, Dr. Leke, I believe you've made some salient points right there, talking about unethical issues and all of this. Now, this transition, is it not supposed to help us address these issues? Or are you saying that it doesn't look like these things are being addressed?
Yeah, the transition is supposed to help us, address all of these issues. But the challenge is that if you look at the company, the performance of the company long before now, it's supposed to be, at least, even if you are not making a lot of profits as a company, you should be doing well. The company, when it was still publicly controlled, is not doing well when other counterparts in other parts of the world are doing well. So now you believe that perhaps one of the ways you can solve the problem is by transitioning to a privately owned company run by shareholders are now in charge, and of course is going to be regulated by CAMA, and it's not going to be subjected to some public laws. But the question is, now all the problem that have been happening in Nnpc before now, what is bringing the problem is not only the fact that it is publicly owned. Okay. It is because it is existing in an environment where there are a lot of hanky-panky. And so the question now is that now that you even transit to a privately owned company, the company is not changing from the environment. And so the environment will, one way or the other, still not allow the performance the way it is expected, even though there is transition.
All right, help us understand this environment.
I'm not saying, eventually you may not start seeing some benefit, but I just feel no matter how you repackage a company, no matter how you do transition, the environmental factors, political factors, all external factor of business, how are you going to manage them given that all of those things have not changed, even though transition has occurred?
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Leke, for your thoughts on that particular one. But then I am looking at the fact that, well, it has transitioned to, something private now. Shouldn't we be talking now about things that should be done to reflect its new status? Irrespective of the fact that it used to be publicly owned, it was state-owned and all of those things. Now that it has transitioned, shouldn't we be talking about, okay, before now, this used to be the case. There was nepotism, we had political undertone and all of this happening. But now that it is transitioning, what do you expect to see? What are the things that will make you feel like, okay, we have graduated from the former environment to a better environment that can actually work, to an environment that favors a private company, to an environment that would favor this transition, to an environment that would favor this new status that we're talking about? So what are the things you want to see? Do you want to hear that, okay, maybe from now on, the president will no longer have to appoint the GMD? Do we have to make it open so much so that it's not about, what is it called now, federal character? Are these the things you want to see? That's the question now.
Okay, yeah, I just try as much as possible to be objective when I'm looking at issues. Of course, I expected to see a lot when there is a transition. And of course, according to the NNPC boss, of course, the intention was that, of course, the new company now is going to adopt a very strategic initiative to achieve mandate of energy security by, one, rolling out a comprehensive expansion plan to grow, the security of the company, and of course, and then there will be more retail presence now that you have private sector. Because if you see how many outlets of NNPC do you have now, you have well over 540 outlets, and they are looking at increasing that to about 1,500 within the next 6 months. Now, if the comprehensive plan as it is written down is going to be achievable, why not? This is what everybody is clamoring for, because the moment you have the expansion of the retail presence of NNPC in all over the place, and that forced down the price of PMS, and of course that brings a lot of pressure on the privately owned oil firms, and then it will bring about competition, and that will force down the price. That is the original plan. But the question has always been that in spite of all of this, now how sure are we that some of these factors that I mentioned, like political factor, economic factor, sociological factor, technological factor, globalization, legal factor, international factor, and even demographic factors, how are we sure that all of these factors that have been affecting privately owned company that we have presently, how will it not affect the so-called NNPC Limited? So the comprehensive expansion plan that the company is rolling out is fantastic, but I'm just looking at in what environment do you think all of this expansion plan can operate? Of course, there are quite a number of strategy the new NNPC are adopting, and the quite number of them that we may not be mentioning a lot of them.
You may want to talk about some of them, if you do not mind.
Is the expansion of the outlets. So like you said, what I expected is that now that you have a new management, of course, a lot of external influences from the government will not be involved. Experts are supposed to take over and run the company, and of course, they should follow the strategic plan that they've drawn. And so I expected a lot from all of this, but my fear still remains that this environment, at times, if I want to be economical with words, do not make plans to work as expected.
All right, still on this environment, I hope that someday we would understand this environment better. Well, let's look at some of the gray areas. I mean, some persons were taken aback when Kyari was talking about the fact that, well, they no longer owe. He was talking about the fact that it was the former corporation that was owing and that the new corporation isn't owing. The question is, what happens to that money?
Now, according to Kama, what happens is that once a company is owing and then they are transiting, now it's assumed that the former company is dead. And when it comes to debt, you cannot owe a dead man. And so the question is, now that you now have a new company owned by shareholders, no longer owned by the government, of course, the government are expected to take the responsibility of the debt that is owned by the company. And these are also some of the factors I try not to talk about, given the fact that people that were badly affected as a result of mismanagement of the NNPC in terms of debt, and now you are forming a new company, and you feel some of these people will not want to look at one way or the other possessing some asset. In fact, according to Kama, if a company is owing and the company is dying, you are expected to sell the assets of that company and share among the owners of the company. So, but this one is a public company, but the question is they are owing. So now that you are transiting, how do you handle the debt? According to Kama, that is going to be very difficult for the government, even though it's not a problem for the new company, which is the Nnpc Limited. So the issue of debt is also another thing that will linger for a very long time. And I do not know about the plans of the government to handle that aspect. But according to law, the new company that is formed is not owing, because once a company is formed, of course, it has the corporate ability to acquire or sell assets or borrow loan in its corporate name.
All
so the former debt, of course, is something that perhaps is going to be, it has to be handled by the courts as to how are the people going to be paid, the people that are owed.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor.
They do not really have issues about that.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Leke Ebenezer. Well, we're talking about the fact that the former Nnpc was owing FAC, and now, well, that will be resolved definitely. We'll take a break now, and when we return, we'll bring you the Global Oil Report. Stay with us.